Well, that was awkward. My recording software crashed. Anyways, as I was saying, where was I? Right. Now, I was talking about my D&D campaign and the backstory behind how the planet got to its condition where the Earth had managed to basically align with D&D through massive repeated apocalyptic events. Now, obviously, this is a thing that I created. This is a sequence of events which I entirely concocted off the top of my head. But this is the official lore of my campaign. Oops. I did not intend to do that. This sequence of events is the sequence of events which created my campaign backstory, basically. The various events which transpired allowed for humans to end up in contact with dwarves and elves. And those were other races that were competing for mineral resources, for territory resources. These were basically opponents that were after the same materials that the humans were after. And the humans were not very fond of this fact. And therefore, the humans wanted to basically, stop the dwarves, stop the elves, because the elves were getting in the way, the dwarves were getting in the way. The humans just wanted to be humans, They had the mindset of, well, it's our planet. And the elves were like, but nature. And the dwarves were like, screw nature. Mining is where it's at. And it's like, oh boy, everyone's just all kinds of messed up, But they were fighting, and they ended up through the stable connection of the ethereal plane. They ended up starting making deals with devils, demons, and fiends. These devils and demons and fiends ended up, getting bigger and better deals as time progressed, and as they ended up with, more humans and dwarves and fae and archfae, basically, doing deals and selling souls. Some people would sell their souls, some people would sell other people's souls, sometimes legally, sometimes not. You know how it goes, right? However, the devils and the demons started getting progressively stronger, progressively able to do more and more and more, until eventually it got to the point where the devils and demons start getting a little bit greedy. Now, it's normal for humans to be greedy, and it's normal for a little bit of greed amongst devils and demons, but not to this degree. Specifically, this was a whole new level of greed. This was a level of greed that had heretofore since been never witnessed before. the amount of greed which was present was so obscene that the devils themselves were sometimes finding themselves not exactly all that thrilled with the prospect of doing the deal. They were sitting there going, wow, don't you think that's a little much? And it's like, aren't you a devil or a demon or something? Why do you care? And it's like, fair point, but your soul, who am I to tell you what to do with it? And so, they would do the deal anyway, but then they started finding themselves able to do more and more and more. And finally, they got to the point where they could open a portal to their home plane, Avernus, and they ended up actually going ahead and opening that portal. And they launched a full-scale invasion of Earth. Now, obviously, Earth isn't going to take that one on the chin and just surrender. Humans are just not like that. We've all seen Doomguy in action. We all know where this is going. Humans fought back. Humans deciding, well, if they can open a portal of that size on their own, why can't we? It's the mindset of anything you can do, I can do better. And in their defense, they weren't exactly wrong, but they weren't exactly right either, as their plan had a bit of a problem. You see, in the process of them opening all of these portals and unleashing this massive torrent of power, they ended up attracting the attention of the angels, the celestials, the actual divine guardians of the prime material plane. And these divine guardians were not happy that the humans were behaving in such a manner. But more importantly, they weren't happy at the devils and the demons and the fae and the dwarves. And so they just decided, well, if everybody's being bad, then I guess we might as well just show up with big flaming swords and go to work. And so they started just... they swooped down. The first thing they did was they shut down this massive giant portal that was allowing the demons and devils to fly in from Avernus. And then the next thing that they did was they started indiscriminately murdering everyone, which was not very good for everyone else. But, it was great for the angels because they got a lot more souls and they were very happy and they were able to get a lot more powerful very quickly. But at the expense, they lost a lot of followers, as they indiscriminately just, executed pretty much everyone for their various crimes against whatever. They ended up with a lot of fallen angels as well. But primarily, the main thing that they ended up with was they had a lot of people basically end up infused with various types of magic. These types of magic would sometimes manifest in more unpredictable methods. Enter wild magic sorcerers. The various spellcasters that were involved ended up finding themselves more adept at casting magic as the presence of the Celestials increased. However, this was somewhat of a double-edged sword, as the Celestials were kind of trying to hunt these people as well. Therefore, it ended up causing a massive cataclysmic event, more massive than having a gigantic portal to hell open up over your town. You know, that is a bad event. But then there was the Celestials then there was the Celestials deciding that they wanted to, have the have the world basically end. They were just like, nope, this is too much. We're not going to allow this to continue. We're just going to cut down everyone. And it's like, well, you can't just cut down everyone. And they were like, oh yeah? Who's going to stop us? And then humanity was like, well, all of us. And then they were like, what do you mean, all of you? You can't all possibly think that we're the bad guy. We're the good guys. We're the Celestials. Are you kidding? And they were like, well, yeah, but you're kind of murdering everyone. And they were like, well, yeah, but everyone is murderers. So what's your point? And they were like, I see. And then they decided that instead of talking it out with calmness and tact and understanding, they decided that they were just going to try and destroy each other. And for a while that worked, until it didn't. And then they found out that in addition to the Celestials, there was the gnomes, and there was the evil Fae, the actual legitimate evils, which were, Drow, and then there was the evil dwarves, the Durgar. Those factions split off from the others to do their own thing for their own reasons because they wanted to. That was legitimately their reason. They just wanted to. They were feeling constrained in their current locale. Therefore, they were like, well, then I'll just change where I am. If I can't do what I want where I am and get away with it, then I'll just change where I am. And so they did. They were like, okay, well, in that case, let's just do this. And they ended up with a massive amount of magical buildup in certain areas that caused a lot of dangerous things to occur. And these dangerous things sometimes would happen very rarely. However, other times these dangerous events would occur very rapidly with very little warning, sometimes no warning. Like sometimes it would just be, out of nowhere, there's a 500-foot radius fireball that is 9th level. Basically, it's like, oh my, that's a lot of fire in one location. It's like, yeah, it is. Is there any one individual responsible for it? No, it's actually a massive group of individuals all doing certain things in a certain sequence of events that caused a cataclysmic failure of the stability of magic. And this caused a lot of issues for a lot of people in a very, very short period of time. These people were, at the time, normal. They were just average, everyday citizens. But they each had their own role that they played in the sequence of events. Not any singular person was responsible for the cataclysms as they came to be known. The dwarves and their massive war machines, their warforged war machines, the Duragar and their cursed bloodline with mixed with the blood of giants, which they had managed to discover in the process of I believe they were trying to fight off the elves. Yeah, that's what it was. They were trying to fight off the elves, and then they ended up realizing that if they could reincarnate the elves into the form of one of their foes, then they could actually turn the elves against each other. Now, this worked for a time until, again, it just stopped working. In this case, the elves ended up not being very happy about the fact that they were being turned into various things and they were being experimented upon. But the act of the reincarnation had brought about the presence of trolls, and therefore the elves had to contend with trolls. Now, trolls, if you're not familiar with trolls, are a form of giant. And that means that, as the trolls continued to increase in population, the trolls found themselves getting stronger and stronger, having more and more freedom to do as they please. They ended up wanting to basically not have to fight everything. So they started creating stronger trolls, stronger versions of themselves. They found that their abilities were more limited compared to what they were normally used to. However, their capacity for strength had greatly increased. They were far stronger than they ever had been before. And therefore, these new elves were very happy with these new elves that had been converted into trolls were very happy with being able to measure out and dish out a form of justice, if you will, in basically causing all of these creatures to no longer be able to properly reproduce, or perhaps they couldn't grow their own food anymore. Various other strange and weird punishments that the elves brought upon the other races as a retribution for changing them from what they once were. They were no longer elves. They were some abomination that had been formed in the minds of their enemies as they had seen it. The elves did not take kindly to this themselves either, and they found themselves on the losing end of a very, very long battle. And this battle was supposed to only last for a few years. It ended up lasting for 100 years. I know what you're thinking. That sounds extreme. You are correct. It is extreme. It was a very intense war. It was very long. It was very arduous. It had many twists and turns in the war. There were war machines that were built. There were war machines that were lost. There were various various bargains made with nefarious entities of various nefarious origins, and there were plenty of souls to be harvested, plenty of deeds to be done. But the biggest problem that anyone really had actually came from the changed elves, the giants that had been born. You see, no one had really accounted for the elves sticking around in that form. Apparently, the reincarnation process had been manipulated and twisted to create some form of permanent alteration to the species that refused to allow them to return to their previous form. No matter what they tried, they couldn't become an elf again. Not for a lack of trying, mind you. They were trying. They just couldn't figure it out. No one really knew what had been changed about the spell in order to prevent the reincarnation from allowing an elf to once again become an elf. However, as they continued to try and reincarnate, they would sometimes find themselves getting stronger or faster, or just generally more dangerous, depending on how they did it, and where and when. The new giant kin found themselves becoming more diverse and in need of some form of guidance, some form of order, some form of leadership. And thus they ended up discussing how to deal with these dealings, as they were, how to organize this chaos that had been brought upon them. And they decided that if they were to try and organize it, they would need some form of leadership. They would need some form of person to look towards for guidance. Someone who was more stable, more in tune with their heritage than the majority of them had been left with, as the majority of them had found themselves on the losing end of the non-genetic lottery, as it were, as they were magically altered through a means of reincarnation, forced reincarnation, I should point out. As the majority of reincarnations will not reincarnate unless the target is willing and able. This was just doing it if the target was able. Willing was not a factor in the spell, and that was what really mystified people was, not only who would do something like that to a spell, but who could do something to that degree, who could alter a spell to that degree and survive. They couldn't really think of any single person who could or would be finding it possible to do that, much less someone who would be willing to do that. They just couldn't think of it. They never did find out who caused it before the destruction came. The newly formed giants decided that they were going to deliver some just desserts, as it were. which means they were going to punish those who were punishing them. They were going to wreak havoc upon those who had made them. And they were quite successful at it. However, it did not end well, as there was a hefty price which was paid. You see, in the process of them achieving their vengeance, they managed to additionally wipe out all of the people who were trying to help them return to normal on the Elven allies' end. This in turn forced them to no longer be able to return, for sure. There was hope before they attacked, but once they decided to unleash a full-scale attack, the chances of them returning went from low to none. And that was why they had, in fact, wanted to wait on attacking. They wanted to actually have a chance to return to normal. Once the attack happened, though, and the researchers had been killed for their lack of producing a result, a desired result, that is, the research was lost with the researchers, as they were at the time going through a bit of a situation with keeping track of notes and keeping track of history. All of their historians were kind of busy trying to just preserve their own history, and thus all of the notes for research ended up lost, sadly, as they had to sacrifice a vast quantity of not just research, but additionally a vast quantity of lives in order to prevent the attack from spreading out of control to the entirety of the Elven civilizations. They ended up creating various wards, which caused a lot of elves to die in the process, because they had to sacrifice their lives in order to create the ward. It was quite literally blood magic. It was I believe it's called a mithril or something like that. I don't remember the exact wording. I would have to look it up. However, it's one of those ancient arcane spells that would consume the life of the caster as part of the casting, and the life force of the caster would then become the duration of the spell. If that life force ever got hurt or injured or harmed or put in danger even, then the spell could just end, and whoever was used in the creation of that spell would then find themselves very, very dead with no return. Not even a hope of return. There is just no return. Their spirit simply would cease to exist, as the component for the spell is quite literally their spirit. Once the spell ends, their spirit ends with the spell. I don't remember the name of that type of spell, but it's a very potent spell that is entirely sacrificial. If you succeed, your body dies, but your spirit lives on forever, in theory. If your spirit ever dies, the spell ends. If the spell ends, your spirit dies. your spirit and the spell are connected. If you find yourself, facing off against something that is trying to, devour your soul, you would have certain protections based on who helped you cast the spell and what they did. But beyond that, you would not actually have any means of defending yourself. You would just have what the spell provides, and whoever helps after the fact. Meaning that if an army of dragons were to show up, then the dragons would pretty much have free reign, unless, of course, there was something specifically in the spell that counteracted dragons. A lot of spells did not account for the dragons, which showed up very recently thereafter. And the dragons were a bit of a mixed blessing, as some of the dragons were very greedy, and other dragons weren't. They were very, they were very helpful or nonchalant or just generally unbiased. Some of them would fight, some of them wouldn't. It kind of depended on what type of dragon the negotiator found themselves sitting across from. If they found themselves, for example, sitting across from a gold dragon, well, they probably won't fight, but they can, at the very least, help the wounded. They can, retrieve the wounded from the battlefield and make sure that the people get the care they need. They get tended to. They, have plenty of people watching over them and making sure they're safe. However, this was not a sure thing. This was not a guarantee, as the dragons had their own agendas, obviously. It was not an alliance. It was more of an agreement that they would help, but to what degree was not specified. Therefore, when the agreement to help was called to action, the humans found themselves facing off against an enemy that they had not really considered, and that was the enemy of the enemy that they had made within the ranks of the dragons. The dragons had sometimes caused a bit of strife, a bit of chaos, and generally the dragons were not exactly well understood at the time. Plenty of people tried to bargain peacefully with the dragons. However, the dragons, as I mentioned, had their own agenda. If they deemed a human not worthy, they would, of course, probably at some point later in their lives decide that the human shouldn't be around anymore. And then they would simply allow the human to die, as they put it. Or a more accurate way of putting it would be that they forced the human to find themselves in a situation which caused the culmination of their actions to rear its ugly head and end up dashing the hopes and dreams of the malicious human in question, which had attempted to do as they pleased a little too much. The dragons were not very appreciative at all times of the humans, and the humans were not exactly appreciative at all times of the dragons. This process was a bit cyclic, obviously. This cycle caused a lot of issues amongst both races, as they found themselves on decently equal grounds as the other races found out what was going on with the dragons. As the dragons continued to expand their radius of influence over the various domains, the humans ended up putting up a decent fight. However, the dragons ultimately won, as the dragons were simply far too prepared and far too powerful for the humans to actually manage to achieve any form of reasonable resistance. The resistance that they did manage was nowhere near enough. And thus, the humans found themselves retreating underground for about 100 to 1,000 years, depending on what section of territory they found themselves in. Now, keep in mind, this only brings us to about year 5,000, 6,000. There's still another 3,000 years to go. So you can see now just how bad things had managed to get for the humans and the elves and the dwarves and the dragons and the drow and the giants and the celestials and the fiends and the fae and the demons and the devils. And I haven't even gotten to the Kuo-toa yet. As you can see, it was a massive, massive war. You know, the quantity of people that were injured alone was in the billions. Okay? I know what you're thinking. There's only a few billion people on the planet. You are correct. Humanity was really, really, really culled down heavily. And as a result, humanity kind of started getting a little bit defensive. They started getting a little bit mean. Humanity found itself on the losing end of a massive intergalactic, interstellar, interdimensional war. And humanity was not very pleased with the outcome. However, humanity did manage to find some semblance of safety, as their general diversity and their ability to just kind of fit in anywhere, because they had all of the good and all of the bad and all of the in-between. They just kind of survived by intertwining themselves with the various cultures of all of the other religions and all of the other cultures and all of the other species. So in order for the humans to go extinct, they would basically need to end up finding themselves their enemies would end up needing to find a means of causing extinction level events that would wipe out multiple species or target a specific species and nothing else. And that happened every now and then, but it was very rare to find something that was effective for very long against just one species or just two species. Mostly it was more along the lines of you would find something that would, for example, at one point they summoned the Tarrasque, and they were like, I know, we'll just create this creature that will just be this thing that ends all the wars. And they created the Tarrasque out of that plan, and that Tarrasque ended up then proceeding to completely devastate everything that they had ever worked for. And then it decided that it wanted to take a very long nap after that lovely meal that it just finished eating. So the Tarrasque was a bad idea, as you may have guessed. However, there was a silver lining to this plan, and that was that in the process of all of this occurring, the humans had managed to muster a bit of a comeback, if you will. The humans had managed to get enough rest in their in the planning phase that they planned to, or they managed to enact a plan to preserve themselves, a plan of self-preservation, through the desperation and pleading of for mercy of the humans to the other races. The races managed to ally themselves against the dragons and found themselves comparing notes and finding out what did and did not work against dragons. Some of the dragons ended up being exonerated for their actions, as the dragons were simply defending themselves. However, other dragons were not so lucky, as some of the dragons were acting out of their own selfish desires. Therefore, the dragons themselves were asked to help in the fight against the dragons, and some of them agreed, some of them did not. The majority of them did not. They opted to stay neutral. They opted to stay out of it. They just wanted to live their lives. They had their own agenda. And if their agenda conflicted with that of the humans, so be it. But the dragons had their own agenda. They did not intend to be controlled or forced to bow to the will of another. They were going to live their lives, and they were going to be very happy doing it, no matter what anyone said. Much to everyone's dismay, as this caused quite a few humans to struggle for quite a while in the process. Some humans were hurt, other humans were saved, and in the process, the dwarves were separated from the Durgar, the drow separated from the elves. The various races found themselves needing to sort out each other's messes as well as their own before any real progress could get made in the realm of negotiations. Not for a lack of effort, mind you. They were definitely trying, but they found themselves needing to redouble their efforts, needing to really focus on what was actually important instead of just their own desires, their own agendas, their own plans. They had to actually work together and unite and unify in order to properly create some plan, some cohesive plan, if they had hoped to survive. Fortunately, they managed this, and that was sometime around the year 8000. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the wars, as the various other creatures had managed to break free from their various imprisonments and restrictions. The various war groups had managed to create such chaos and such cataclysmic situations that the survivors of those situations found themselves with no home to return to, nowhere they could live. This caused problems for many races, because it was not just any single race that was affected. It was everywhere. It was everyone. You know, it wasn't just the dwarves. It wasn't just the humans. It wasn't just the elves. It was the dwarves. It was the elves. It was the Duragar. It was the giants. It was the vampires. It was the succubi, the incubi, the cacodemons, the maw demons, the devils, the fiends. All of these various creatures and all of these various alignments had managed to find themselves without any form of place to call home. They found themselves wanderers, lost amongst a sea of possibilities where everyone hates them because of what they did, but half of what they did was because of other people who had wanted bad things to happen. Therefore, it's really not their fault that they managed to have such a vitreous relationship with everyone around them. However, it was their fault that they managed to hurt so many people around them, because that was quite literally what they were trying to do. You know, that was their task at hand. That was their goal. That was what they were paid for. There were various other reasons given, but basically it was their fault, but it wasn't their fault. You know, it was their fault because, yes, they did it, but it wasn't their fault because they were hired to do that. That was just a job for them. You know, they don't see anything wrong with it. You know, it's just a job. Does the blacksmith get punished for molding the metal? And then someone pointed out dwarves were a thing, and they were like, oh, right, of course, blame it on dwarves. It's like, no, I'm not blaming it on dwarves. I'm saying, yes, they do get punished for, you know, molding the metal, because dwarves are a thing. Dwarves will kick your butt if they think you're infringing on their turf. You know, dwarves are fighty. And, you know, the various creatures and various creations had ended up having this massive turf battle, basically, over Earth. And in the process, Earth found itself in a very, very upset state. Earth found itself in a very dangerous state, because what happened next was earth-shattering. And I mean that quite literally, because the Earth quite literally shattered, causing massive continents to get these vast rifts between what used to be connected sections of territory. The vast territories which used to be these various continents that were affected found themselves no longer able to sustain life for a period of time that varied from location to location. But in short, in summary, the event caused a devastating loss of territory to pretty much all of the races, as they all very quickly found themselves wanting some form of safety, some form of refuge, which would be provided if the race surrendered. And as expected, they were not exactly in a surrendering type of mood, because all of a sudden they wanted somewhere to live. Now they suddenly had a reason to fight. And so they fought. And when they fought, they ended up creating massive amounts of destruction and massive amounts of death as a result. This death, this chaos, and this destruction which was wrought ended up causing a lot more than your average destruction, as the dwarves turned the war machines against other dwarves that they suspected were responsible. The humans turned their various weaponries against other humans that they believed responsible. No one could really trust anyone by that point, because everyone was hurt. Somebody had a grudge with someone. That was actually a motto of the devils at the time, was, it's okay. You know, you can have a bad deal every now and then. Everyone's got a grudge with someone. You know, it'll be fine. It's like, oh my, things really have gotten out of hand, haven't they? And it's like, I don't know what you mean. Well, for starters, you guys are running the place. It's like, yeah, okay, I can kind of see what you mean. It's like, yeah, when devils and demons are running the place, things have gotten out of hand. Yeah. Therefore, they ended up trying to call a truce. Keyword trying. Not everyone was very accepting of this truce, and on top of that, not everyone was willing in this truce. Some people were very, very vocal about their objection to the truce. They didn't want a truce because they still had a grudge that they wanted to resolve. And because of that, a lot of people got hurt. And a lot more people died. And then a lot more people had basically everything that they knew and loved kind of go away for a really long time. And basically, anyone who really knew anything too valuable ended up probably dying in the resulting chaos, death, and carnage that ensued as the various races finally turned on each other, as they decided that it was better for them to war than it was for them to get along, And this caused them to ultimately just kind of destroy each other in the process. They were not able to peacefully resolve their differences, meaning that they were no longer able to find a method to return to their old lifestyle. However, this was not true for all of them, as some of them had managed to figure out their original lifestyles. Some of them had managed to preserve the oral traditions as they fled from the dangers and deaths and destructions that were being forced upon them from the world, from the various warring nations. And in the process of, just living, they ended up with a rather strong foothold in their attempts to survive. They found themselves very well prepared. They found themselves fighting easier and easier opponents, and they found themselves better able to fortify their position. Now, this did not come without cost, obviously, as they had to fight tooth and nail, basically, for the territory which they had, and then they had to fight even more in order to maintain that territory, in order to keep the territory. Because, again, keep in mind, the dwarves had literal war machines. The dwarves had literal means of just mining out from beneath a city the entire foundation of the city. Therefore, these settlements that had managed to prosper found themselves extremely high priority targets because they were able to sustain life for so long that they eventually became a haven for some of the targets that these various entities were after. They ended up becoming these refugee camps in a way, and these refugee camps slowly ended up becoming cities and settlements and towns and various other types of locations that would later find themselves being these prosperous areas because they were so strong-willed in their attempts to survive that they wouldn't die, They refused to die. I was not paying attention to the durability of my shovel and found myself with a broken shovel. And that's kind of sad. Fortunately, I had a spare. Now, I need to go over here and continue digging, but I additionally need to make sure that I don't run out of inventory space. And I'm about to run out of inventory space, therefore I should actually instead hop on the minecart and head back to base. Because now that I have this rail line, I can get back to base easy. This is nothing. This is a piece of cake. This trip is easy. Matter of fact, I might just hook this rail line up with the mine entrance over there. And that way I can just do a direct one-to-one a direct one-to-one commute without needing to transfer lines constantly. You know. Maximum speed. Warp speed. Engage. Good old Picard. I miss watching Star Trek. That was a great show growing up. I was surprised to learn at one point that there were many, many episodes that I never saw. I was like, what do you mean I've never seen this episode? I thought I saw all the episodes. Nope. Surprise. Apparently there were like 20 or so that you missed. You missed an entire season and a half. It's like, but how? I've been watching them all. Yeah, no. You missed a lot. It's like, oh man. Now I gotta watch all these episodes. Oh, the humanity. I mean, I would like to say it was a bad thing needing to watch a bunch of Star Trek episodes, but that would be a lie. Watching Star Trek was great fun. There we go. Then we go over to here. Now, let's see. Oh, we're right here. Okay. Oh, and some stone as well. Lovely. Where are we on the stone? Yes, yes, yes. I'm getting to you. Do you mind? I'm trying to put away all of this stuff. Sheesh. Such a pushy slime. Sure I deposited all the barrels. Yep, okay. While I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and grab a bunch of rails so that I can hook up this rail line in one continuous segment. I will briefly remove the cactus. Ah, right. It is additionally a good idea to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Helps me, helps the channel, tells YouTube that this is the type of content that you enjoy seeing. I understand that, you know, shameless self-promotion kind of thing is kind of, it's a thing, but like, it really does help a lot if you actually like help the channel. Oh, right, this is actually one of the areas I want to access. But yeah, it does help the channel a lot if you subscribe, if you leave a comment. Like, all of that stuff does actually provide a benefit. It performs a lot of useful promotion for my channel, which is still kind of growing and still kind of new. You know, I understand that my channel is aged. Yes, my channel is not exactly new. I get that. But, you know, my channel does provide a useful benefit in the method of entertaining the adoring audience, which is you guys or girls. I'm not picky. You know, there's a lot of things that can be